You were never too sensitive. You were just more awake in a world that prefers everyone asleep. People don't always shout or get aggressive. Sometimes they hurt you in silent, sneaky ways that leave you feeling wrong, invisible, even like you're too much. You walk away from conversations carrying a silence that isn't yours. Your shoulders tight, your jaw clenched, and a thought sneaks in. Maybe it's me. But Carl Jung saw this clearly long before modern psychology named it. He understood that if someone hasn't faced their own inner shadows, they'll hurt others quietly through ignoring, dismissing, shutting down emotionally. Even worse, if you don't understand your own patterns, you'll keep inviting that pain over and over, believing you're just unlucky, not lovable, or overly emotional. Now, what if every person who hurt you was actually reflecting what you've been taught to tolerate, not your true worth? Jung didn't just give us theories. He gave us warnings, 44 truths about relationships, boundaries, and emotional survival that echo beneath every heartbreak you've endured. If you don't know these 44 truths, people will keep hurting you. And the worst part is, they won't even feel guilty, because when pain becomes familiar, it becomes invisible. So let's get started with the first truth. If you don't define your value, others will discount it. Every time you stay silent when you should speak up, every time you put someone else's comfort over your own truth, you're telling the world that your worth is negotiable. Truth 2 is tough. The people who benefit from your silence will call you're speaking up selfish. The moment you name your needs, the backlash starts. They'll say you've changed, that you're difficult, but really, it's their control slipping away. Truth 3. The shadow isn't evil. It's just unexpressed power. The anger you suppress, the fire in your gut when someone disrespects you. That's not a problem. It's your sacred protection trying to keep you safe. Truth 4. People don't really hear what you say. They respond to what you tolerate. You might say, "Don't talk to me like that." But if you stick around while they do it again, your actions speak louder than your words. Boundaries without follow-through are just noise. Truth 5. Every time you apologize for being hurt, you teach yourself to erase yourself. You've said it too many times. "Sorry, I'm tired," or "Sorry if I'm overreacting." Jung would ask, why do you keep apologizing for your pain? What part of you believes feeling is a burden? Truth 6. Trauma teaches you to see love as the same thing as survival. If love meant pleasing, shrinking, or adapting, that's the type you'll keep seeking, but it isn't actually love. It's pain wearing a disguise. Truth 7. If someone's love asks you to betray your true self, it's not real love. It's a transaction where you lose every time you say yes to what breaks you, just to keep a peace that isn't genuine. Truth 8. The masks you wear to be loved, like being easygoing, always available, or smiling when you want to cry, become cages. They work until you forget who you are beneath them. Truth 9. Emotional labor without equal give and take is exploitation. You comfort, explain, hold space, absorb the damage, and they call it love. But what do you get back? Because love that only flows one way isn't love. It's depletion. Truth 10. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow twice. The first time can be a mistake, but if they keep crossing your boundaries, that's on you. Your silence gives permission. Truth 11. Not everyone who understands you deserves access to you. Even toxic people can understand your past and mirror your feelings. But insight without integrity, that's manipulation. Just because someone sees your soul doesn't mean they should control it. Truth 12. You're not too sensitive. You're finally listening to your nervous system. That sick feeling in your stomach, the energy crash after a call, the urge to withdraw, these aren't anxiety. That's your truth whispering to you. Truth 13. Loyalty to dysfunction isn't virtue, it's conditioning. You stay, forgive, justify, but Jung would ask, are you loyal or just afraid? Afraid of loss, change, being alone. Staying in pain doesn't make you loyal, it makes you lost. Truth 14. If someone loves you only when you're easy to love, it's not love, it's consumption. The moment you get real sick, say no, disagree, they pull away. That's not rejection, it's revelation. They loved your silence, not you. Truth 15. Over-explaining is trauma disguised as logic. When you feel the need to justify or defend what should be obvious, it's not about the myths, your learned fear that clarity makes you unlovable. This is just the beginning. There was a girl, quiet and soft-spoken, the kind who made herself small to keep the peace. She was the nice one who let others interrupt, the one who laughed at jokes that weren't funny just to avoid awkwardness. Then one day, during a hostile conversation, she didn't laugh or nod. Instead, she said, "Don't talk to me that way," and left. Her legs shook, her chest was tight, but she walked away anyway because she understood that being understood is not the same as being safe. Jung believed each person must go through a symbolic death, the death of the false self. That girl buried the version of herself who thought endurance was love, and what rose in her place? Someone no longer interested in being palatable. When did you first learn that being silent was safer than being real? Was it a parent's tone, a teacher's glare, a friend who ghosted after you cried too much? That's when your real voice went into hiding. And from then on, people could hurt you in gentle, manipulative, well-dressed ways, because the part of you that should have screamed had been sedated. But it's not too late. These truths aren't here to make you bitter, they're here to wake you up. And the next 15 truths, they unravel projection, narcissism, emotional boundaries, and how to disarm empathy used as a weapon. Healing changes you, and it often makes you unrecognizable to those who only knew you when you were broken. They'll say you've changed, and in a way, they're right. But what they really mean is you're no longer easy to exploit. Here's Truth 17. Love needs room to grow. If your love isn't allowed to evolve, it will expire. Relationships don't die because people disagree. They die when one person grows and the other refuses to adapt. Love that stays stuck and stagnant quietly rots away. Truth 18 is about boundaries. People who've thrived on your lack of them fear your boundaries now. They might call you cold, guarded, or harsh. That's projection. What they're actually saying is, your self-respect now limits their control. Truth 19. When you stop over-explaining, manipulators lose their grip. These people thrive on confusion and endless, draining conversations, but when your truth becomes non-negotiable, they go silent because your clarity isn't a conversation anymore. It's a wall. Truth 20. Empathy is a gift, but only when it's protected by discernment. You might have been giving too much, seeing your compassion as currency, feeling others' pain more than your own. But love without discernment is a contract to erase yourself. Truth 21. The desperate desire to be understood makes you tolerate the intolerable. You keep trying to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. The problem isn't your clarity eats their comfort. Truth 22. When someone crosses your boundary and then acts offended, you've exposed their entitlement. Healthy people adjust when you express your needs. Unhealthy ones retaliate, not because your boundary is wrong, but because they never intended to respect it. Truth 23. You are not responsible for how people react. Emotionally, when you outgrow them, guilt will whisper, be softer, be nicer. But growth isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And if your growth wounds others, it was never your job to shrink to their limits. Truth 24 is sharp. People don't leave you because you become toxic. They leave because you become self-respecting. Watch closely once you start standing up for yourself. Some people just vanish, not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer easy. Truth 25. Your triggers aren't flaws, they're messengers. When someone calls you too reactive, Jung would ask, what memory just got touched? Your emotions aren't defects, they're information. Truth 26 explains projection. It's when someone accuses you of being what they fear in themselves. They might call you manipulative when you set a boundary, or selfish when you ask for space, but what they're really seeing is what they refuse to face inside. Truth 27. Some people get addicted to your dysfunction because it validates their own. You're easy to be around when you're anxious, doubting, or The moment you heal, they feel exposed because your clarity makes their chaos harder to ignore. Truth 28. When someone pulls love away as punishment, it was never love, it was leverage. You felt it, the cold shoulder after you said no, the silence when you stood your ground. That wasn't love retreating, it was control collapsing. Truth 29. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You just have to enforce them. They'll push for reasons, try to debate, but this isn't a courtroom. Your boundaries aren't negotiable. They're doors locked and final. Truth 30. You don't owe anyone continued access to a version of you they feel entitled to. You've grown, you've changed. You don't laugh at the same jokes or chase like you used to. That's not rudeness, that's revolution. Jung understood something rare but vital. Every soul has a gravitational pull. a psychological orbit that attracts situations matching its self-concept. If your inner belief is "I must be easy to love," you'll keep seeking people who require difficulty to be impressed. If your mantra is "I don't deserve too much," you'll settle for just enough to keep you doubting. The universe doesn't give you what you want, it mirrors who you believe you are. Now, we're almost there. In the next and final part, we'll reveal the last 14 truths. These include how to protect your energy from subtle predators, how to stop trauma bonding with people who reflect your wounds, and how to live in a way where your self-respect is so unshakable that chaos no longer holds the keys to your life. You're almost at the finish line. When you truly know all 44 truths, not just in your head, but deep in your body, you'll stop confusing survival for connection. You'll stop bleeding for love, and you'll finally understand what it means to be whole. Let's dive into the final 14 truths. These aren't about survival anymore. They're about reclaiming your sovereignty. Truth 31. Your peace will upset those who depend on your chaos. The calmer and more centered you become, the louder their reactions get. They can't find you in old patterns anymore. Your silence, once mistaken for submission, has now become your shield and they hate it. Truth 32. If you ever feel like you have to beg someone to understand you, that person is committed to misunderstanding you. Clarity doesn't need performance, and you should never have to audition for love. Truth 33. Some people don't want resolution, they want control. They'll provoke, delay, distract, not to fix things, but to stay in power. Jung understood that when someone fears their own unconscious, they try to control yours instead. Truth 34. The most dangerous gaslighting happens when you do it to yourself. Those internal voices that say, maybe I'm too sensitive, or maybe I'm asking for too much. Where did those come from? Who taught you that pain is normal and should be hidden? Truth 35. Self-abandonment wears many disguises: loyalty, sacrifice, spirituality, love. But if you have to disappear or lose yourself to stay connected to someone, that's not devotion. It's a wound disguised as virtue. Truth 36. You aren't difficult. You're simply done, quietly self-destructing. Let people call you what they want. Labels don't stick to those who know their truth. Truth 37. People without boundaries will always see yours as cruelty, and that's okay. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. You weren't born to carry their emotional literacy. Truth 38. Manipulators confuse empathy with access. They think that if you understand them, you owe them something. But understanding someone doesn't mean you have to tolerate everything. Truth 39. You can love someone deeply and still choose yourself completely. This isn't selfish, it's sacred. Love means becoming so full of yourself that you overflow, not deplete. Truth 40. If your absence disturbs someone more than your pain ever did, that wasn't love, it was dependency. They didn't miss you, they missed the version of you that never asked for anything. Truth 41. The more healed you become, the more boring you are to people addicted to drama. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant and don't engage the same way. That's right, because chaos no longer feels like home. Truth 42. If their idea of love requires your exhaustion, it's not love, it's performance. You're not here to audition for career, here to be met where you live. Truth 43. Some people bond through wounds, not values. When you start healing, those bonds break. They didn't love you, they loved your pain. And when you stop bleeding, they leave. Truth 44. The highest form of self-respect is walking away quietly and fully without needing anyone to understand why. You don't need closure, a final word, or to be right. You just need to be done. Let me paint you a picture. One morning, you wake up without the urge to check your phone. No need to see if they responded, reread old messages, or rehearse your next conversation. Something inside you has finally closed, not bitterness, but clarity. You realize the apology never came, respect was never genuine, and love was always conditional. And instead of spiraling, you simply breathe. You get up, make tea, stand in the light. There's no hunger for revenge, validation, or explanation. You just feel whole. This is the silent miracle Jung spoke of. The moment your identity no longer depends on how others treat you, because you've faced yourself in the mirror and didn't flinch. Ask yourself, what's the cost of staying small, of being nice instead of honest, of keeping others comfortable while your soul suffocates? You've been trained to fear the fallout from telling the truth, But what about the consequences of staying silent? Carl Jung said it best: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that privilege is earned through grief, shedding, and disappointing every person who only loved your camouflage. You're here now. You've remembered the truths. You've seen the patterns. You no longer call pain loyalty, and now something truly starts. You become magnetic not to everyone but to those who recognize truth, who've done their own shadow work, who don't fear your depth, and who honor your no just as much as your yes. Your life becomes lighter not because there's less weight, but because you stopped carrying what wasn't yours. Your days become quieter not because you're alone, but because chaos no longer knocks, and your soul becomes louder not in words, but in presence, because this is what it means to know all. 44 truths. You're no longer available for self-erasure. You no longer mistake survival for connection. You don't confuse potential with partnership, and you never bleed for validation. Again, you live, you breathe, you rest. Imagine waking up one morning and not feeling the urge to check your phone. No need to see if they replied, reread messages, or rehearse your next words. Something inside you finally closes not in bitterness, but in clarity. You recognize that apology never came, the respect was never genuine, and the love was conditional all along. Instead of spiraling into the past, you simply breathe. You get up, make your tea, and stand in the light. You don't seek revenge, validation, or explanations. You just feel whole. This is the silent miracle Carl Jung spoke about. The moment your identity no longer depends on how others treat you, because you've faced yourself in the mirror and didn't flinch. Ask yourself, what is the price of staying small, of choosing to be nice instead of honest, of keeping others comfortable while your soul silently You've been conditioned to fear the consequences of speaking your truth. But what might be the real cost of staying silent? Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that privilege is earned through grief, through shedding old layers, through disappointing everyone who only loved your camouflage. You're here now. You've remembered these truths. You've witnessed the patterns. You've stopped calling pain loyalty, and what begins now is something new. You become magnetic not to everyone, but to those who see truth, who've looked within themselves, who aren't scared of your depth, who honor your no as much as your yes. Your life feels lighter not because there's less to carry, but because you've stopped lugging around what's not yours. Your days grow quieter not because you're alone, but because chaos no longer knocks on your door, and your soul speaks, louder not in words, but in pure presence, because this is what it truly means to know all. 44 truths. You're no longer available to erase yourself. You no longer mistake survival for connection. You no longer confuse potential with partnership, and you never again bleed for validation. You live, you breathe, you rest, and within that rest, you rise. So here's where it all comes together. When you truly internalize these 44 truths not just with your mind, but with your whole being, you stop confusing survival for connection. You stop bleeding for love that was never meant to nurture you, and you begin to understand what it really means to be whole. This journey isn't about becoming bitter or hardened. It's about sovereignty, owning your power and your story, standing tall in your truth, and no longer being haunted by the version of you who tolerated pain just to feel wanted. You become magnetic not to everyone, but to those who recognize authenticity, those who have done their own shadow work, who aren't afraid of depth, and who honor your no as much as your yes. Your life grows lighter not because the weight disappears, but because you no longer carry what wasn't meant for you. Your days quiet not because you're isolated, but because chaos no longer knocks on your door, and your soul grows louder not in desperate words, but in undeniable presence. This is what knowing these 44 truths means. You are no longer available for self-erasure. You no longer mistake survival for meaningful connection. You do not confuse raw potential for true partnership, and you never again bleed for validation from anyone who doesn't see your worth. You live, you breathe, you rest, and in that sacred rest you rise. Remember, Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. It is a tough path, earned through grief, shedding old versions of yourself, and disappointing those who only loved the mask you wore. But today, you stand here, having remembered those truths. You see the patterns clearly. You refuse to call pain loyalty. Look ahead now, and step fully into your power. The power of choosing you, Because at the end of the day, no one else can define your value or your limits. This is the freedom you were made for. This is the life you deserve. No compromise, no self-erasure, just the real, whole you. And with that comes a peace no one can take away. You live, you breathe, you rest, and in your rest you rise.